homicides last year in this province, and today the Premier decided or appeared to be doing something about it. Christy Clark held a press conference announcing $3 million in funding against domestic violence. Critics say funding levels are so low and have been so low for so many years, these crime crumbs amount to little. I want to check in now with Irene Tsepnopoulous-Elhaimer. She's the Executive Director of Women Against Violence Against Women. Irene, hello. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much for having me on your show, Aaron.
Using the proceeds of crime to pay for a violence strategy in British Columbia, I'm thinking that doesn't sit well with you.
No, we're extremely disappointed with this report, and it's called the Vision for Violence-Free BC. And actually, if the government fails to acknowledge the lack of response and adequate services to women who've been impacted by violence, then, they really are looking at this issue with blurred vision. So this is extremely concerning for us.
What is it? Is it the amount of money? $3 million doesn't sound like an overwhelming amount coming from a provincial government, or is it just the source of the funding, which seems like it could fluctuate year to year based on how many bad guys the province catches?
You know, it's both and. $3 million is such a small amount, and if you look at the actual problem, what's happening with regards to violence against women, we have at our Rape Crisis Center, we have 160 women that are currently on the wait list and have been asking for us to provide counseling service. And so that's a 1.5 year wait list. And so that's not an adequate response to women who've been impacted by violence. Now, the sheer amount, the sheer magnitude of the problem of violence against women in British Columbia is truly astounding. We have in this report statistics that say 3,200 reported to police sexual assaults every year. We have 12,300 reported to police domestic violence incidents in British Columbia in 2013. That's over 1,550 incidents of violence. If we do the math, $3 million divided by 15,500, we're looking at under $200 per woman. So the magnitude of the problem is not balanced. It's disproportionate, this amount. And yes, you're right. Very true. Waiting for police to catch the bad guys, as they're quoted saying, and waiting for those proceeds is really cynical. This kind of response is not what women in this province deserve.
I want to play you a clip if I can. Suzanne Anton, the Minister of Justice, was interviewed today, and she talked about that funding, talked about the money that will come from the proceeds of crime legislation. Take a listen.
Civil forfeiture funding is a function of how much is brought in by the Civil Forfeiture Office over the course of a year, so that it can vary a bit. In fact, it can vary quite a lot in terms of how much they bring in. But it has been fairly constant, and we feel fairly confident that there can be ongoing funding for the Violence-Free British Columbia initiative.
Irene, it seems like the Justice Minister is admitting that the funding could go down significantly.
Well, and there she's seeing clearly. And the amount of money that's required has not been dedicated for women. We need this money to be coming from our provincial budget. Dedicated money, not waiting for the police to throw us the crumbs of crime. This is unacceptable. And the women that are waiting for services grows every year. We've seen at WAVAW Rape Crisis Center, women calling for counseling service. It went up from 129 women who've called us every year in 2012 to 190 in 2014. And just this year alone, we're 5 weeks into the year, we have 17 women who have called asking for counseling services after sexual assault at WAVAW Rape Crisis Center. Now, we cannot wait any longer. This funding needs to be delivered to anti-violence organizations that are responding to this violence. And this is not what we're seeing. This is not the promise that has been made by our government.
What did you say, 17 women in 5 weeks?
17 women in 5 weeks have called us asking for counseling. And now they're going to be on a wait list that will be 1.5 years long. And now what we have to remember is, at WAVAW Rape Crisis Center, we serve girls 14 years and up. just this past year, we served 10 girls between 14 and 18. That is unconscionable to have women and girls calling for service and then being told that there is a wait list. So that's the reality. That's the reality of violence here in British Columbia and here in Vancouver from our perspective as a rape crisis center.
It seems to me disingenuous that the government would put out this flashy press release and say that they're funding a violence-free BC when they can't even come close to that. I'm astonished that they could be so naive.
Well, so are we, and we're astonished that this inadequate response continues year after year. Specifically, we know that the programs that the government has been funding have not increased over the years. Since 1993, WAVAW has had 1.5 counselors for Stopping the Violence program, and we continue to have the same amount of funding for this counseling program 21 years later. So, we agree this is not okay. And the same goes for other services that are required for women, and we haven't seen those increase over the years as well. So this is not acceptable at all. And furthermore, in this report, the numbers are there. We know that violence against women, spousal assault in particular, costs $7.4 billion in Canada. Can you imagine a fraction of that money being put into providing services and responding to violence against women? That would save a lot of taxpayer dollars. And that's what we're asking for. We're asking for money to be put in to serve women, to respond to violence, so that we don't end up having a cost of over $7 billion a year. Women deserve adequate responses, adequate services, and that's what we want.
I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank you for your time. Irene Tsepnopoulous-Elhaimer is with Women Against Violence Against Women. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Still ahead.